This meeting will be recorded, just for your information. Welcome everyone on another Open Cluster Management Community Meetings. Today we have two topics, one on ArgoCD, the integration, the pool model. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about our 0.9 release. I think our scheduled release date is tomorrow. Qjan, do you have anything that you want to mention for our 0.9 release? Do we go through the regular exercise of cutting the branch, performing the release, etc.?
Yes. I think we have tagged the 0.9 for some repo, but not all. And add a change log for some repos just to remind that we don't require each add-on to follow the same release cadence. So it is not necessary for each add-on to do that. But if there are any thing, so I will send, I will create a PR to put the release notice later. So and send a PR to let everyone to review what should be added, what should be changed. Maybe not, if it's not tomorrow, it will be earlier next week.
Thank you, QJ. Any other questions or comment regarding the 0.9 release from anyone?
Yeah, so if the add-ons aren't on the same, I think from a policy perspective, we would prefer to try to stay with the release. So, but the release change log, is it not going to include add-ons from this point forward, or how is that going to work?
It could. I mean, I think it doesn't. It can, but it's not so necessary. I mean, it's not mandatory. So if there is anything that we want to add it into the same notice, it could be added. Or if the add-on have another release cadence that also want to put into the release notes, I think we can have another PR to add an additional item for the release announcement for the add-on. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think in general, from a policy standpoint, we would prefer to just kind of follow along and not try to make it too complicated. But I understand the separation.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for app, we're gonna follow along as well. Thank you for that question. Any other comments and questions before we move on? Okay, we're gonna move on to our next topic, which is we're gonna talk a little bit about the ArgoCD application pool model again. So we had our initial proposal. Just to provide a little background context, we proposed it to the ArgoCD community, and then they gave us great suggestions. So I'm gonna go over, and then this is the sort of like the implementation based on their suggestion. So just to give a little bit more background context on ArgoCD, so the current ArgoCD delivery model is primarily the push model. You have the ArgoCD control plane on the sort of like the primary hub clusters, and then on each remote clusters, the ArgoCD control plane has the list of secrets with the credits to the remote clusters, and then the applications will be reconciled and directly apply, connect, and push the resources down to the cluster, the remote clusters. So which is a little bit different from our current open cluster management application subscription model. So our application subscription channel models is actually more similar to this pool model diagram. And that's our first phase of trying to implement this ArgoCD pool model. So we're thinking on the left side, we have the hub cluster. On the right side, we have the managed clusters. So the same thing, we're going through the ArgoCD application set which generates a bunch of applications, ArgoCD applications. But in this case, these applications are dormant. They're not going to be reconciled by the ArgoCD application controller. Instead, we have this new controller in this repo, the application pool controller, which will wrap these dormant application inside of manifest works and place them on the managed cluster namespace on the hub cluster. Then on the managed cluster side, they will pull this payload, application payload, by looking at the manifest work down to their local cluster. So then each managed cluster have the application, and then inside it they have their own application controller, and then they'll deploy the resources that way. So the reason why we want this pool model, we talk a bit about it, scalability. So that's the reason why Open Cluster Management went with the hub-spoke pattern, because it's quite well researched and documented that it offers better scalability. And in terms of security, ArgoCD now can leverage Open Cluster Management, the registration, by not having to store credentials on the control multi-cluster control plane cluster. And then it also reduced the single point of failure. So if the hub cluster goes down in this case, then all these remote cluster will stop being synchronized against the Git repo. But on the decentralized model, it's a little bit more reduced, the single point of centralized failure. So to use this controller, I'm gonna show a demo on how to use this controller. So to use it, you obviously need the Open Cluster management environment setup. And so we're not gonna go through that today. We have other videos and documents on how to do that. And then the Open Cluster Management basically provides, again, the list of inventory and a list of cluster inventories and the ability for workload to be delivered or pulled from the hub cluster down to the managed cluster. And then the hub cluster and the managed cluster will need to have an ArgoCD install. So before I continue forward, are there any questions so far? Okay, I'm gonna continue on then. So the only catch right now is on the hub cluster with the ArgoCD install, because we don't want the application to reconcile. So we want the user for now to scale down the application controller. We're going to propose to the ArgoCD community on introducing some kind of annotation or option so that we can have this ability without scaling down the deployment. So follow along the instructions. It's more about just starting up the pool controller, and then on this part. So in order for application sets to generate application, the ArgoCD cluster needs to be imported to ArgoCD. But in this case, you can just create a secret that represent the with the label, with this specific label. Then that sort of implies that it's imported. But as you can see from this content, it doesn't actually have the credentials to connect to the managed cluster, because all that is taken care of by the Open Cluster Management API. So this is sort of like a dummy secret. And for this part, we already have a controller that automatically can import these managed cluster into the ArgoCD control plane. This project maybe it's a little bit OpenShift centric right now, but we're gonna make modification to it so that it supports the open upstream community as well. So I already went through some of these steps, and then you apply and then by following the example, you apply the hub, and then on the manage, you apply the manage manifest, and then and then finally you apply the guestbook. So let's take a look at some of those manifests right now. So on the managed side, mostly it's just by giving the clusterlet the ability to have the permission to work on the Argo applications. And then that's another, just the cluster role binding on the clusterlet work source account. And then on the hub side, so this is just the, so we have the cluster set binding, the placement, the role and the role binding again. So all these is to assist the placement, the open cluster management placement, be able to select all the clusters, all the managed clusters, and then the generators for picking out the decision that the placement creates. So it'll make more sense if I show this guestbook application set, which is the primary manifest that I'll be applying. So if we look at the application set manifest, we have the generators here. So the generators here basically evaluate the conditions here. So in this case, it'll be our Open Cluster Management placement API. So it looks for a placement. It looks for a placement, and then it looks at the decisions that it generates, and it requeues every 30 seconds. For each of the cluster decision, it'll populate this template below. So in each of the cluster, there's a cluster name, and then it'll generate a application with name and with the cluster name, and then guestbook app. And here is what allows the application pool controller that we have in the repo here to reconcile. So if the application contains this label, then it means it's for the pool model. So this annotation here is just to let the controller knows in which namespace the manifest work should be created at. So again, if the decision, if the generator came up with decisions of cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, there'll be 3 applications with cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3 as the value for this name template variable. So let me just apply. So I got the controller running on locally. So let me just apply this. So because I only have one managed cluster, it will generate one application based on the application set that I just created. So as we can see in the app, in the application, it is sitting dormant. It's not being reconciled because the controller has been scaled down. So when the pool model application controller picks it up, it sees the label with the pool. Let's look at the pool. It sees the label pool to OCM management cluster equals to true, and then it reconciles on it, and then it will generate the manifest work on the managed cluster namespace based on the annotation provided, which is in here. So cluster 1. So in cluster 1, I'm expecting to see a manifest work. So when the manifest work is created, the app will be pulled down to the managed cluster. And then we can see the app is actually deployed in the guestbook namespace. So then the status is actually feedback back to the manifest work. And then thank the other team members in the app, such as John on the OCM app team, Jonathan, Phil, and Shengjing will be collecting these feedback status, and as well as using other components to bring all the resource status back on the hub cluster. So a majority of this controller is about propagating the application, the ArgoCD application down to the managed cluster. And then if we delete this, so we can see that everything should get cleaned up as well. And then on the managed cluster side, everything gets cleaned up successfully. So let me see if there's any other thing. So that is essentially the model currently for the application pool controller. Are there any comments, any questions? Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, I will increase the terminal size. So one thing I want to talk about, since I see Josh on a call, is so in the proposal originally, the ArgoCD community recommended that we have the two controllers, one for importing the secrets. So originally, as I was implementing the import secret controller, that got really complicated because I the secrets needs to be placed into the namespace with the application into the along with the application sec the CR. So in order to determine where that namespace goes, the best way to do it is with our placement, and it sort of ties in with our security model with the cluster set and then cluster set binding as well. So I ended up thinking, you know what, we already have the integration repo that does all of this. So why not just, we just need to enhance it here so that it supports creating these dummy secrets when it's a when it's a when by introducing an annotation. Let's see if there's an example here, so that okay, this for these types of import, they're not going to actually contain the quest to be able to connect to the managed cluster, but instead of that, it'll just be more of like these dummy secrets to be used by the application set to create the applications. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's the way we should do it, and I was going to nudge you in that direction, or maybe remind you that we had that in OCM anyways already. That it made it to me, it just made sense to enhance that capability, and I agree with the annotation.
Okay, sweet. So, well, since we have more control over this part of the code, and perhaps we're going to probably leave this controller in open cluster management. Maybe, do you think a spec change will be okay, or what do you think?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Yep, that's mainly what I wanna share and discuss. Actually, it's this controller. Any feedback from anyone regarding the pool controller? It's really early in the project right now. I quickly hacked it up so that hopefully Maggie in next community. Oh, she's not in the next week's KubeCon can also have like one slide dedicated to this as well, to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do with the ArgoCD community. So any comments regarding this pool model? I mean, this pool controller?
Yeah, Mike. Yeah. So I also have some comments for the creating the dummy secret to the ArgoCD names. Yeah. So here we are. Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of similarities between our existing GitOps cluster controller and the proposed the controller. But the major concern is so in our existing GitOps cluster controller. So that's actually um, to copy the cluster secrets that's already generated in the cluster namespace. And so right now only the OpenShift clusters they have this cluster secret that we're able to copy from the cluster namespace to the ArgoCD namespace. And in this dummy one, I guess maybe if the managed cluster there are not OCP clusters, then probably we need to figure out another way by enhancing this cluster a little bit. Then I guess maybe we need to specify another spec into this GitOps cluster API to indicate to guide the GitOps cluster controller to just create the dummy cluster secret. So yeah, because in that dummy cluster secret, so we don't need to get the token, the cluster tokens. So we just need to create a cluster secret to the ArgoCD namespace. So I think that should be fun. So maybe yeah. So I think by this way, then if we enhance the existing GitOps cluster to support generating the dummy secret, then we will fit this gap.
Yep, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking that this GitOps cluster. So I know right now the foundation they already provided a global cluster set, and by picking up all the managed clusters. So maybe we can also leverage these functions. So in this GitOps cluster for the placement reference, we can also specify this global placement. So by that way, so we always get all the managed clusters.
Yes, but I think that is up to the user. So the user can pick. So the user can pick the placement they want, right? So
Yeah.
if they want to pick, they want to pick all of it, they can pick all of it. If they want to limit their access, then they can. It depends on what they want.
Yeah. So yeah. So we providing this flexibility to users. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, because the main thing I couldn't solve was the namespace of the secrets. Because the application set, when it generates the application, those secrets need to live right next to it. Right in the same namespace.
Yeah.
So even if I create those dummy secrets in our namespace, the application set couldn't see them. So that's why I feel like the easiest way is just we use this GitOps cluster that Josh and Will created, which will create the secrets in the namespace that the user wants. So, and then regarding the placement, like we said, it's up to the user, however they want to define it, and then to pick the managed clusters that they want. Thank you, Shanjing, for the comment. Any other comments regarding this topic? So I encourage everyone to try and play with it and see what the problem is with this controller. I think one of the main challenges was actually importing and using the ArgoCD as a library, because I think unlike Open Cluster Management, where we have our own API repo that doesn't have a lot of implementation code, when you import when you import ArgoCD, it actually comes with the API as well as all their as you can imagine, their Kubernetes dependency that allows them to apply and do all the resource manipulation. So it was actually a lot of work just to fight through and make the controller one time be able to grab the ArgoCD dependency. And then I was hoping to use one of the functions, I think in our add-on framework. I think Kujang mentioned this great helper function in the add-on framework here. So this allows you to build the manifest work easier by using this this common library, but it sits in the add-on framework right now, which itself has a whole bunch of dependencies. So by tying those two dependency together, the ArgoCD and the add-on framework, it got really messy, and I wasn't able to do it. So that's why I created
That's
Sorry, go
on
ahead.
fly. We are in the API repo actually to move that helpers into the API repo. So maybe you can also review that.
Yeah, I think I created issues on I think I created the issue on is it enhancement? No, it's not enhancement. No, I clicked the wrong one.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, I think I created a issue on the add-on side. Maybe I should create on the API side. So I see. So Z-Way is already working on this. Okay, that would be great because if once it's moved over, then I can just import the API, which is what I want, and then I can leverage that library a little bit easy. Okay, thank you so much, Kujang and Z-Way, for doing this. That's all I have for the pool model, and our meeting's coming close to the end. Any last minute comments, questions?
I have.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, I have another question for Chujian. So, yesterday, we got a Canary test failure. Basically, we were creating the placement API with the v1 alpha 1 in our Canary test. But right now, so I noticed that the placement and placement decision API, they already removed the v1 alpha 1